money, and go home. That's their plan. So the Dutch arrived, and they're really excited about the beavers. They see a ton of beavers on the island in Manhattan, and they're like, hats, warm, waterproof hats, and great big waterproof jackets. The Russians are gonna love it. So they're really excited. They're gonna make money. And then they make a deal with Lenape. They think they're buying the island of Manhattan. But the Lenape, the indigenous people don't believe in land ownership. How can you own the land? It gives to you, you give to it. It's an exchange. So when the Dutch give them 60 guilders and some trade goods, or $300, which is not a very good deal for the island of Manhattan, they just think it's a good faith payment. They're going to work the land together. So we are still on indigenous unceded lands and water while we're here in New York. We are going to end up going south, but the tide's taking us out this way, so we're going to come out and turn around. Not to be confused about what's happening, just in case you were curious. So the Dutch arrive, and they're here for 40 years, leaving their imprint on what they call New Amsterdam. And then the British take over. About 40 years later, and it's not a smooth transition, but basically the deal goes, the Dutch are annoyed that the British are still bothering them on some of their trade routes. Remember, they want to make money in Suriname in South America and the island of Run in Malaysia. Those are the two spots that are no good. And they say, hey, Britain, if you let us have those two spots, we'll give you Manhattan. And the Britons are like, really? Suriname? Island of Run? Great, let's do it. So the Treaty of Breda is signed, and what is New Amsterdam becomes New York. Now, like, fast forward through the British Revolution, the Americans are wanting to erase everything British about New York because they don't want to remember that past. But they keep the name New York. I'm kind of surprised they didn't turn it back to New Amsterdam, but I guess New York was like solid at that point. So they keep a lot of the old names, but they erase a lot of the British names. We get names like Harlem, Brooklyn, Staten Island, Vansport, Roosevelt. These are all Dutch names that we've kept post the British American Revolution. The Dutch were here for 40 years, and they very much leave their footprint on Manhattan. New York feels different than the rest of the United States, and I think it's because of the Dutch. The Dutch are much more inviting to immigrants. They also have their own little red light district. A big spender, right? So New York feels different, and I think it's because of the Dutch. 40 years is a long time. When the Dutch, when the British took over, they did not make the Dutch leave. They allowed them to just kind of stay because they were having a hard time populating the island. They're like, yeah, you can stay, no problem. As we're turning around, just behind the Circle Line dock, we have the gray Intrepid aircraft carrier vessel. That's the Intrepid. It was active during World War II, the Cold War, and the Korean War. Today, it's a museum for airspace and sea travel. And on the far side, you can see the Concorde, one of the original Concorde airplanes on the pier. We're going to come back that way. We're going to come under the George Washington Bridge, which is in the distance, on the right side of the boat. We're going to come back under that. I'll save it for when we do that. And we're on our way. So we're pulling away from Manhattan across the river. This is the Hudson River. Across the river is New Jersey, specifically Weehawken. Weehawken is where the famous duel between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr took place. Spoiler alert, 200 years later, both guys are dead. So that took place up on the cliff. If you're a fan of Hamilton the musical, you'll remember a line, they rowed across the Hudson. Can you imagine rowing across the Hudson? I would get like 20 minutes in, I'd be like, I guess I'm going to Staten Island and not New Jersey. Like, that would be the end of it for me. We're pulling away. We have Midtown on the left side of the boat, a variety of skyscrapers. We're going to see them on the other side as well, so we'll save the Empire State Building for the other side. And then as we get a little further down, there's another large outcropping of buildings on the waterfront, and that's Hudson Yards. Hudson Yards is built on top of the old railroad yard, so the trains that are not in use from Penn Station, they're hanging out there. They're still there. So not only do we own land now, but we can own the land on top of somebody else's land. So air rights. So all those buildings are built on top of someone else's land. The tallest building is 30 Hudson Yards. It has an observation deck called The Edge, which has a little triangle sticking out of the building with a glass bottom floor. terrifying to me. I will not be going up there. You can also rappel off the side of that building if you're feeling really like you need some adrenaline. It's like $85 or something like that in person. Crazy. I'll just be on the boat. My friend was like, how can you be scared of heights? You're on a boat all day. And I was like, I don't see how those two things are related. She was like, well, you're not safe on either of them. I'm like, well, I can swim. I cannot fly. Like, I don't understand how. That's confusing, but that's how it goes. Down close to the waterfront, there's a sculpture called the Vessel. It's got interlocking staircases, and it's kind of gold. The artist named it TBD the Vessel. To be decided the Vessel. Thomas Heatherwick wanted the public to submit ideas on what to name it. The public came up with ideas like Stary McStairface and The Hive and King Kong's Jungle Gym. And it was concluded that the public could not be trusted with such a task. So it remains called the Vessel. Behind Hudson Yards and in on 9th Avenue is the High Line. It's an old elevated freight rail that was abandoned in the 70s, and there were some people who were illegally trespassing and maybe giving tours of the High Line. And then the city was like, maybe we should have it be available for everyone. So they turned it into a public park. They hired a landscape architect to make it all pretty. And the landscape architect loves fall. He loves fall so much, he says there's 5 seasons: fall, winter, spring, summer, and fall again. Since it is fall right now, I would recommend checking out the High Line on this trip if you have an opportunity, because, next time you come it might not be fall. But you can see the beautiful trees along the waterfront. The waterfront used to be all industrial shipping space until the 70s when they all moved away. And then the city was like, what do we do with the waterfront? The most valuable property anywhere. Well, they decided to turn it into a public access park, which is great, because then behind the waterfront, where there used to be all industry, people now want to move to be next to the park. So now they have all these apartment buildings alongside the park. So they've turned the neighborhood around really fast. And the name of the game, architecture-wise, is to build a building that is recognizable from the skyline. So if you say, that's an interesting looking building, they have succeeded at their job, because it makes you think about it and remember it. Most of them don't have names, they just have addresses. But a lot of them have nicknames, which we'll talk about a little bit on this tour. We're coming past Chelsea Piers, which is the blue piers with the red and white stripes. That's a famous boarding facility. It's also where Law and Order is filmed. The green netting on the far end is protecting us all from golf balls, because there is a 4-level golf driving range there. So if you love to hit a golf ball, that's a great spot for it. And it's been made famous in many TV shows and movies. If you recognize it, you're probably right. The one that comes to my mind is Serendipity, but there's lots of other ones out there too. On the New Jersey side, we're now looking at the great town of Hoboken. Hoboken is 1 square mile and home to Kate Fox, Frank Sinatra, and the first ever played Major League Baseball game. Hoboken is 1 square mile, and for having 1 square mile, it has the most bars and churches of any square mile in the United States. So there's a lot of drinking and a lot of praying going on in Hoboken. On the Manhattan side, we're coming alongside Little Island. Little Island is being held up by a bunch of tulip-like structures. The artist is also Thomas Heatherwick, the same guy who did the Vessel. I like to think that the tulips are kind of a homage, harkening back to our Dutch days, but I think it was just a cool structure, and it made it so the waves didn't crash onto anything solid. It's a bit of an Instagram trap, if you ask me. Not a whole lot to do unless there happens to be a concert or an event happening at one of the amphitheater concert spaces. But a beautiful park, and then afterwards you can go and check out Chelsea Market for some great tacos, or there's lots of other good things. I love Los Tacos #1 at Chelsea Piers. That's my favorite Chelsea Market, if you have a chance. So we got some wild-shaped buildings. One of them kind of looks like an iceberg behind the green netting, and we do nickname that building, the white one, the iceberg, because the Titanic was supposed to land right behind Little Island. And so it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek comment. Not very nice. But if you were coming in on a big ship, coming from Europe to the United States, Jersey side, we're passing by the Erie-Lackawanna train station and ferry depot. So it's easy for New Jerseyites to take a train to to her lips, implying shh. The artist wanted you to pause and listen to the message of the river. And what does the river say? Clean me up, please, please clean me up. We've definitely been throwing our waste into the river for a long, long time, and it's about time that we clean it up. There's a project called the Billion Oyster Project trying to reintroduce oysters into the harbor. Oysters, when they eat, they filter the water through their teeth and effectively clean up the water that they're in. So the oysters, there used to be billions and billions of oysters in the harbor, and New York Harbor is one of the largest, best harbors, natural harbors in the world. It's 5 miles by 4 miles, and there were so many oysters they could clean the harbor in a matter of days, if you could believe that. So we're trying to get that many oysters back into the harbor. They're collecting used oyster shells from oyster bars to rehabilitate the beds, and as of 2018, the oysters are here. They're back. There's not billions of them, but they are cleaning. So this is great. I'm not quite ready to dip my toes in the water, but you know, maybe. On either side of the river right now, there are some brown boxes, and those are the Holland Tunnel ventilation towers. So Clifford Holland designed a tunnel that goes under the riverbed, and because of that, you have a lot of carbon monoxide in the tunnel. So in order to fix that problem, he designed ventilation towers that have about 80 fans in any of the towers, cleaning out the air, circulating out the air in the tunnels every 90 seconds so that people can breathe. It's nice. We like it when they can breathe. Just a little side comment on oysters being back in the harbor, cleaning the harbor. If you do go to a restaurant that is advertising local oysters, maybe don't eat there. That would be my tip for you. Don't eat the local oysters right now. Maybe in 40 years or so. On the Manhattan side, we got a view of the World Trade One or Freedom Tower. World Trade One is the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere, 1,776 feet. The spire itself is 400 feet. To me, that's cheating. You don't get to be the tallest building in the world if 400 of your feet is a spire, but no one asked me. That's fine. It has an observation deck on the 102nd floor, got a great view of the entire city. There are so many, the observation decks are really competitive right now in Manhattan. So if you ask me what's the best observation deck, I'll say, what view do you want? Do you want a $25 cocktail with your view? Like, what are you hoping to achieve with your evening? Then we can talk about it. I like history and a view. I like Rockefeller Center for the Central Park and Empire State Building view. And you get like Statue of Liberty and Ellis Island in the background. So World Trade One, and then just to the right of that, there's a kind of a hole in the skyline, and that's where the Twin Towers stood. There are 2 infinity pools in the footprints of the Twin Towers on the ground level. The infinity pools are powered by so many streams of water to represent all the lives lost in the attacks, rather than just one long stream of water. The names of the people who lost their lives are etched in the granite around the pools. The granite's heated so that the names will never be covered, and the names are organized in a way that reflects who knew each other, who went to lunch together, who sat next to each other. It's a very thoughtful memorial called Reflecting Absence. So if you have a chance to check it out, I highly recommend checking out the 9/11 Memorial. On the New Jersey side is Jersey City. Jersey City is the fastest growing city in the nation right now, mostly because when 9/11 happened, a lot of the businesses couldn't stay in the financial district neighborhood, so they moved across the river to Jersey City and set up shop there. And now a lot of people live in Jersey City because it's kind of been on their radar, and it is a really fast ferry ride just across the river to financial district. You can imagine like a 40-minute subway ride from Harlem or from Brooklyn versus a 10-minute ferry ride from New Jersey for maybe a similar price. If you don't have a view of Manhattan, you can maybe find a similar price. If you have a view of Manhattan, you're just wanting it for the view of Manhattan. So we're coming up on Ellis Island next. So if you got processed, you have to get processed when you're immigrating to the United States. Ellis Island, you would go up a flight of stairs, and then you'd have a medical interview. They wanted you to go up a flight of stairs because they wanted you to be able-bodied. They wanted you to be, strong. And then they did a 7-second interview looking at you for medical issues, diseases, for it. What if we get you involved? We got $25. Now we're at like 20. How about you? We get 5 people involved. Do we now have $25? Yes, we do. So the person at the front of the line gets the $25, puts it in their pocket, and they have $25. And they say, yes, I have $25. And after their interview, they take the $25 out and pass it to the person behind them. And then they have $25 in their pocket. And they just keep passing it down until all is said and done. And then they redistribute the money. And voila, everyone had $25 and didn't lie when they had the moment to. And then you go, if you pass the interview process, you don't get your money exchanged, and then you go to the concession stand. And the concession stand is an incredible place, I hear. Coffee, lemonade, sandwiches. One woman said that the sandwich lasted her all the way to Minnesota. I don't know. Which does a abandoned hospital wings guided tour. You have to be 14, and it's a hard hat tour. There is asbestos, but it's a fun tour. If you think that your family came through Ellis Island, you can check out ellisisland.org. They digitize all their records, and that's the spot you can check that out. So Ellis Island coming up with the 4 tourists. That's the main registry center where the initial interview, medical exam, and all that would happen. Statue of Liberty is coming up. Oh, she's wearing green today. I love it when we're matching. Oh, so great. So the Statue of Liberty is a gift from the French people to the American people. It is designed by Frederick Bartholdi. He was really into big statues. He designs her with a torch in one hand and a tablet in the other. The tablet reads July 4th, 1776 in Roman numerals. The design, her outside, she's made out of hand-hammered copper, 300 pieces of hand-hammered copper. So when we get up close, you can see the seams where the pieces come together. It's also where the dirt ends up making a line. Copper, as it ages, becomes green, and the green is called a patina. Iron rusts and like deteriorates, but the copper actually becomes stronger as it ages. It's one of the reasons it's so valuable. And the green, the patina, makes it more water and wind resistant. So it was a thoughtful move. Bartholdi chose copper because it gets stronger over time. Liberty makes you stronger. Having suffered and escaping bondage makes you stronger over time. So Bartholdi does the outside, and Gustav Eiffel does the inside. So the inside of her kind of looks like the Eiffel Tower, except there's a spiral staircase going up the middle of the building all the way up to the crown. Don't worry if you didn't get tickets. It's a 20-minute stair climb. You're not missing out on too much. We get a great view from the boat. But what you are missing out on is going up into the torch. Now, originally, you could climb up the lady's arm, up into the torch, up into the open air where there's just a guardrail. They allowed 12 to 15 people up there at a time. Can you imagine the ladies in their skirts, like going up just a ladder, up to her arm? Oh my goodness. My mom, bless her, she says, I think I went up into the torch. And I was like, Mom, they closed it in 1916. You are not that old. She was like, probably the crown then. I was like, yeah, probably the crown. Love you, Mom. Love you for wanting to have participated and done the cool thing. So the Americans were on the hook for the statue herself, the French were on the hook for the statue. The French people paid for her, and then the Americans were on the hook for the pedestal, which is the stone part on the bottom. And I'll save that story till we get to the end. But what is up there is a plaque by Emma Lazarus with the famous lines, "Give me your tired, your poor, huddled masses yearning to breathe free." So if you can imagine the people coming in from under the Verrazano Bridge, which is off to the other side, that's the Atlantic Ocean. The bridge wouldn't have been there. With the big ships of people coming in, they would have seen the Statue of Liberty and known that they had made it. And then they would have gone on and been processed. So I'm going to let you enjoy the Statue of Liberty. Liberty enlightening the world, and we are going to go by on both sides. quote, he designed her face after the least attractive woman he could think of, his mother. I know. And if you do take a picture, if you take a peek on Google, Charlotte Bartholdi, she does kind of look like George Washington in drag. So it's appropriate. She just looked like that. The Americans were on the hook for the pedestal, for paying for the pedestal. The first, it was a weird gift, a friendship, a really big statue as a sign of friendship between the Americans and the French. What a strange thing. She is facing France to remind France that they could also become a democratic republic, which was kind of the whole point behind it. Thankfully, France followed suit. So the boxes of the statue arrived, and the Americans were like, "Oh yeah, we guess we should probably put money together for the pedestal." So they put the arm together with the torch, and they toured it around the parks, hoping that they could raise awareness and funding. But the people complained. They wrote in letters saying that their children were having nightmares of arms coming out of the ground with flames in their hands. So that didn't work out so well. And then they did some fundraising and such. But basically, Joseph Pulitzer comes along and saves the day. Joseph Pulitzer runs the New York World newspaper. And in order to be famous back in the day, you have to have your name on the front page of the newspaper. That's the only way you know. There's no other way to be famous. There's no TV, there's no radio, there's no Instagram, nothing. Just the newspaper. Joseph says, if you donate even a penny to the pedestal project, I will put your name on the front page of the newspaper. And people are like, what? And everybody starts donating nickels, pennies, and dimes. School children, housewives, immigrants, blue-collar workers, everybody donates anything that they have to get their name on the front page of the newspaper. And it's win-win-win. We raise over $80,000 of donations of pennies, nickels, and dimes. People get their name on the front page of the newspaper, and Joseph sells a lot of papers because people want to buy the paper with their name on the front page of it. The first GoFundMe, the original GoFundMe, crowdfunding, Joseph Pulitzer, and the pedestal. We're coming by Governor's Island on the right side of the boat. Governor's Island was originally Nut Island. The indigenous tribes in the area knew it was time to go to the island because the nuts would be in bloom when they saw the shad bush bloomed. And all of the tribes would come to the island for a great big trading moment and harvesting of the nuts. Later, the Dutch call it Nutten Island, and then the British rename it Governor's Island. They call it Governor's Island because that's where the governors end up living. One governor in particular is extra exciting. Lord of Cornbury. He likes to dress in women's clothing and is frequently cited as flouncing around the Battery. Every now and then he would announce to the people of New York that they could come catch a glimpse of the Queen if they came to Governor's Island. Now Lord of Cornbury looked a lot like his cousin Queen Anne. So people would row their rowboats out to Governor's Island and trumpets would sound and down would come the Lord of Cornbury dressed as his cousin Queen Anne. And I think everyone was just delighted to see the Queen, whether it was the actual Queen or not. Today, Governor's Island, it was a military base for 200 years, and today it's owned by New York. They bought it from the federal government for a whopping $1 bill because it was so expensive to run. Today, it's kind of like our backyard. It's got New York's backyard. Picnic tables, bike paths, there's food trucks, there's a spa. You're not allowed to live there. No one's allowed to live on the island, but people can spend the night. They found a loophole. And what we're looking at right now on the right side of the boat is some white tents. That's glamping. Now, most people in the United States, when they go camping, it's because it's cheaper. But no, New Yorkers like to pay $500 a night to sleep in a tent. Anyone can sleep in a hotel room in New York, but can you sleep in a tent legally? For $500 a night you can. And you can wake up to see the Statue of Liberty in the morning, and they'll bring you breakfast in a basket in bed. I mean, what more could you want? New Yorkers are certainly a wild breed. The round circular building on Governor's Island is Castle Williams. We fortified the harbor in 1811 in preparation for the War of 1812. The British were still giving us a hard time after the Revolutionary War, and we lost Manhattan during the Revolutionary War, so we wanted to fortify the harbor, make sure they couldn't take it from us again. So the British came to check it out, and they're like, oh yeah, that's not a win for us anymore. So they went down to Washington, D.C. and burned that down instead. So we got fortifications on all the islands, including Battery Park. The base of Battery Park is in the trees right next to the white tent on Manhattan. There's another round Castle Clinton, which is another one of our fortifications. We got the Staten Island ferry coming by, the big orange ferry. Hello, ferry people. They are headed probably home. Connect Staten Island with Manhattan. landfill. That is landfill from when we plowed down all the hills in 1811. The original shape of the island you can tell by looking at the different buildings, the shape of the buildings. That's where the original shape of the island is. We've expanded the island a number of times over the years. When we plowed down all those hills, when we dug out the subways in the 1900s, and then again in the 1960s, and then in the 1980s, we expanded it one more time. On the Governor's Island side, we have another ventilation tower. That's for the Brooklyn Tunnel, the big tower at the tip of the island. On the Manhattan side, we're coming by two ferry terminals. The green and the orange one is the Staten Island Ferry Terminal. And then the one next to it that's all beautiful cast iron, green, yellow, purple, and pink, that is the Governor's Island Ferry Terminal. And that's my favorite building in all of Manhattan. I think the cast iron is beautiful, the paint job is beautiful. They renovated it in 2020 and added some glass retail space on the top of it so they could make money, which I think is really smart. One of the businesses that moved in is Cipriani, a really fancy restaurant. So on a really good tip day during the holidays, I might take myself there so I can have dinner in my favorite building in Manhattan. So that's the Governor's Island Ferry Terminal. We're coming up on Brooklyn on the right side of the boat. We got some shipping yards and then the Brooklyn Bridge Park. We're coming up to the Brooklyn Bridge next. The Brooklyn Bridge was a wonder of the world when it was completed. It was the first bridge to span such a wide breadth of water. It was made possible by the steel cable. John Augustus Roebling designed the bridge, and then he passed away, and his son took over, but his son also took ill, and then his son's wife, Emily Warren Roebling, took over the project. And she was a mathematician. She learned all the engineering to make sure she could run the project, and she's the one who made it happen. And some people call the Brooklyn Bridge Emily's Bridge, because she's the one who made it happen. It was a world wonder, and it took 14 years to build. On Bridge Day, the day that it opened, one woman said it was bigger than the landing on the moon. She lived through both, and Bridge Day was more important. The entire city shut down so that they go walk across this bridge. This is the first time you can walk across from Manhattan to Brooklyn. Suddenly you can walk. What a miracle. This was at a time when Brooklyn was its own jurisdiction. It was its own city. Brooklyn was the third largest city in the nation. New York, Chicago, Brooklyn. And then it became one of New York's boroughs in 1898. New York has 5 boroughs: Manhattan, Staten Island, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. And we're going to get to see them all. We just saw Staten Island, and we're just going to circle Manhattan, so we'll see it the whole time. On Bridge Day, Emily Warren Roebling was the first to cross the bridge. She showed up in her carriage with a rooster on her lap, the sign of victory. She opened the window and she waved to all the men she worked with on the project, and they all tipped their hat to her, knowing that Emily was the one who made the bridge possible. And off she went across the bridge. Victory. We're going by FDR Drive, which is the Purple Highway. Normally I'm not into, million-dollar paint jobs, but I really do like the Purple Highway, or the Lavender, Periwinkle, almost Purple Highway. It's meant to make you feel calm and at ease. And for some reason it works for me. I don't know. I'm very susceptible to color, apparently. They chose that color because someone's tie was that color at the board meeting. That's how those things go sometimes. At the base of the Manhattan Bridge, on the Manhattan side, there's a building with a gold statue on top. That is Civic Fame. The tallest statue, second tallest statue in the city after Statue of Liberty. And off behind it is the Jenga building, which is apartments that look like a bunch of blocks stacked on top of each other, like a game of Jenga. Truly winning the architecture game in Manhattan. My favorite story about the Brooklyn Bridge is that not too long after it opened, there was a stampede. A woman, at the time, suspension bridges had fallen down all over the nation, and so people were scared of them. This one isn't going anywhere, ever. But a woman tripped getting off the bridge, and she screamed. And then another woman screamed, and then everyone thought the bridge was falling down, so they all stampeded off the bridge, and there was a big body pile, and purses, and hats, and umbrellas, and wallets went flying. And then no one wanted to cross the bridge ever again because they were terrified. So they had to do a publicity stunt. P.T. Barnum and his circus elephants kind of made a deal that they would cross the bridge, all of his elephants, including his largest elephant, Jumbo, to prove to the people that it was safe to cross. And there's a children's book about Jumbo and the Brooklyn Bridge if you want to check it out. It's fun. The Brooklyn Bridge. The next bridge we're going to go under is the Manhattan Bridge. The Manhattan Bridge is designed for subways as well as cars and pedestrians and bicyclists. The Brooklyn Bridge never had subways, although they dreamed about putting subways over it. It was never necessary because the Manhattan Bridge took the brunt of it. They did have a trolley across the Brooklyn Bridge originally, and today there's a fabulous pedestrian walkway, and the bikes are on their own path, which is nice. A lot of people just get off at the City Hall station in Manhattan, walk up to the first tower, and walk back to get their photos. So that's like the busiest part of the bridge. If you want it a little less busy, you could go to the Brooklyn side. Underneath the Manhattan Bridge on the Brooklyn side is a neighborhood called Dumbo. And it gets its name from the Manhattan Bridge. Dumbo stands for Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass. I think is kind of pushing it. Down Under the Manhattan Bridge Overpass, Dumbo. But you know, each neighborhood's got to have a name sometime. So Dumbo it is. We're going to take a break here if you want to grab a drink. We got some snacks downstairs. We also got people coming around with your official Circle Line photo. If you want to check that out, I'll catch up with you just under the next bridge, the Williamsburg Bridge. Quite a while ago, but they have turned the waterfront area into park, which we all love, and then they're turning the old sugar factory into an apartment building. So they stabilized the exterior, and they're going to build another building inside it. The Dulong Park on the waterfront, and they put a taco place on the waterfront. Who doesn't love tacos on the waterfront? If you don't love tacos on the waterfront, please don't tell me. I don't want to dislike you for the rest of the tour. You don't like tacos on the waterfront. Keep that to yourself. It's okay. seawall 8 feet in the air to protect that neighborhood on the other side of FDR Drive because it's experienced flooding over the years. So they're going to raise the waterfront 8 feet. They're going to bury the park and then build it again on top. Some of the people in the neighborhood are really grateful that they're protecting the neighborhood from flooding, and some people are like, what's going to happen? I need a park. My children are going to be too old by the time the park's completed. They have promised that during the 4 to 5 years it's going to take to rebuild the park, that 40% of the park will always remain open. It'll take 10 years probably, but that's how it goes. So next time you come to see the waterfront, it'll be about 8 feet taller. So you can see the people running and then add like another 3 feet on top of them. That's how tall the waterfront, the seawall is going to be. We're coming to the end of Brooklyn on the Brooklyn side. Brooklyn is divided by Queens by Newtown Creek, and Newtown Creek comes flooding into the East River, which is where we are now, dividing Queens and Brooklyn. Queens and Brooklyn are both officially part of Long Island, but if you meet anyone who lives in Queens or Brooklyn, you will find that they will say things like, I'm going to Long Island this weekend, and despite the fact they're already on Long Island, they're just going further onto Long Island, and they're probably leaving like New York proper to get there. Brooklyn is known for Brooklyn Botanical Gardens, Coney Island, the New York Aquarium, as well as Williamsburg neighborhood that has some great microbreweries, restaurants, and street art. So we're passing by Newtown Creek as it comes in to the East River. It's just to the right of the red crane. That's dividing Brooklyn and Queens. Queens is where I live in Astoria. It is where we have our 2 airports, LaGuardia and JFK. It's also where the Mets play baseball at Citi Field. 2.5 million people live in Queens, and 5 million people are buried in Queens. Why does this matter? Well, should the zombie apocalypse come, do not find yourself in Queens. It is not safe. The odds are not good. Get yourself to Manhattan. Find a circle line. We'll be there. It'll be an emergency. We'll be happy to take you aboard if you're alive. So don't find yourself in Queens. My grandparents are buried in Queens, and my grandfather was a grumpy old man and don't want to know you'd be like a zombie. So, find somewhere else to be should the apocalypse come. We're getting a better view of downtown of Manhattan, Midtown in Manhattan. We got 2 gold leaf buildings. Have gold leaf on the top. The little spire is the Met Life Insurance building, and the pyramid gold leaf is the New York Life Insurance building. So we like to show off our wealth with gold leaf if we can. So life insurance equals gold leaf. Also has an observation deck, the Summit. It has an outdoor glass elevator. That's your jam. That's another option for observation deck. And then down from the waterfront, towards the waterfront, from the Vanderbilt one is the Chrysler Building, a beautiful Art Deco building with big arches with little triangles in it. One of the most beautiful architecture in the city. The Chrysler Building, it has these little gargoyles at the top of it, and those gargoyles are the hood ornaments that are on the Chrysler car. It's kind of fun to use that inspiration for the art. crooked apartment building that has a sky bridge to a straight piece of the building. That is the American Copper building. It's apartments. And I looked it up. On average, about $9,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment in the American Copper building. That means that some are cheaper and some are more expensive. The sky bridge connecting the two buildings has a 65-foot lap pool, and up above there's some open-air garden terrace spots. If you're feeling like you want a little bit more than $9,000 a month. On the Queen side is Long Island City, which we call LIC. And particularly we're looking at Gantry Park. Gantry is the name of the big black structures that say Long Island on them. So Gantry Park, this all used to be industrial commercial area, and there was a Pepsi-Cola bottling company that left their sign behind for us. But it was all industrial warehouse space, so they put in a park, and then of course people want to live next to it. So now it's got a bunch of new apartments. On the Manhattan side, we're coming up upon the United Nations building. The United Nations building is a live building with green glass. There are no windows on the south or north side of the United Nations building because they didn't want anyone to have the advantage of a corner office. So there are only windows on the east and west side. It can only be facing one way. No one's going to have a corner office, which I think is kind of nice. Behind the United Nations building inside is the Chrysler building, and then of course Vanderbilt one that kind of looks like blocks stacked on top of it. The United Nations is on land that was donated by the Rockefellers, and today if you go to the United Nations, you're on foreign soil. Is Roosevelt Island. Roosevelt Island used to be the spot that we put all the things that we didn't want. You know, the quarantine hospital, the prison, the insane asylum, like all of that went onto Roosevelt Island. Today it's got a lovely population of residences. Cornell University is there, as well as a couple different houses of worship. There's also Starbucks, your other house of worship. But on the tip is Roosevelt Memorial Park with all the beautiful orange yellow foliage. And just past the park is a old structure that's got ivy crawling up it. The ivy building is an old smallpox hospital that today is landmarks that can't be torn down, but it's not safe for people to go inside it. They don't know for sure it's not going to fall at any moment. However, there are a bunch of cats that have moved into the neighborhood, and so they've kind of named it a cat sanctuary. People come by and drop off food and catnip, that kind of thing. So that's the ivy-colored building, the old smallpox hospital / cat sanctuary. Whenever I talk to people who live on Roosevelt Island, they absolutely love it. But whenever I talk to people who live in New York and love their neighborhood, I know that they're going to stay here forever. It's the people who don't love their neighborhood that I know are going to be leaving within 7 years of their arrival. That is the average departure time. People come, they stay for 7 years, and then it's time for them to leave. We're going up under the Queensboro Bridge. The Queensboro Bridge connects Queens with Manhattan and also has an off-ramp onto Roosevelt Island. So that's one way to get to Roosevelt Island. There's also a subway. The S line has a stop at Roosevelt Island. And then we, of course, have the air tram, a little red box that flies to the sky, connecting Manhattan with Queens. The little red box that flies to the sky is very popular for supervillains to take hostages. See if it's flying through the sky. Little red box. Don't see it. You might be able to see it. Wheels behind us. Right before the bridge is the new cluster of buildings that's Cornell University. Columbia University used to be the only Ivy League in the city, but Cornell has moved in, so move over, Columbia. I know, it's just so clear. Roosevelt Island. On the Manhattan side, there's a flagpole. The flagpole that is on the Manhattan side, down on the waterfront. And behind the flagpole is Gracie Mansion. It's a yellow mansion. There's some tents, but the mansion is directly behind it. You got to see it through the foliage. It's definitely easier to see in the winter time, but I think you chose the right time to come on the boat for sure. Gracie Mansion is where the mayor lives, or the mayor is given the opportunity to live. Not all of the mayors have decided to stay there, thinking that it's not as nice as their home. Just past the lighthouse on the left side, or the right side of the boat is Astoria. That's where I live, about 20-minute walk inland. Connects 3 boroughs, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx, Tri-Borough Bridge. And then just past it is Hellgate, which is actually an Anglified Dutch name, Hillgat, which isn't a negative sounding. It's supposed to be Hellgat means a beautiful spot. We think of it as being a horrible spot because it's where the tidal waters come together for some whirlpools. That bridge is for passenger trains. New York is trying to go carbon neutral by 2050. And in order to make that happen, we have to get more people from further away to come in on trains. So they're upping the number of trains going over that bridge from 12 to 40, hoping to get more people to come in on public transportation because it's supposed to be cheaper. And if they add a congestion tax, making it more expensive to drive into the city, why wouldn't you just take a train? This all sounds great until you live along one of those railroad tracks like my friend does, and she's not looking forward to her property value going down because all of a sudden there's going to be a lot more trains coming by. We're taking the left fork to go up the Harlem River. that divided the two of them, and they're now considered one island. It's kind of confusing to figure out which island you're on. No one lives there. It's mostly places to play sports, and there's some nice park areas and picnic areas. We're going under a pedestrian bridge that connects Manhattan with Wards Island. The pedestrian bridge was made famous in the movie The Wiz, starring young Michael Jackson and Diana Ross. This was the Yellow Brick Road. Ease on down the road. Ease on down the road. Don't you carry nothing that might be a load. Come on, ease on down the road. Thank you. You like it, thank you. So we're coming up along East Harlem, or Spanish Harlem, on the Manhattan side. It's a neighborhood that started to be populated by a lot of Dominicans and Puerto Ricans in the 1930s as migration was open for people to migrate up here, up to the United States, particularly Florida and New York. Also, as aviation travel makes the trip easier, we have a lot more people migrating up here. East Harlem is probably where the inspiration for the musical West Side Story takes place. But in musicals, they kind of tend to bastardize things or kind of change them up a little bit, take their own liberties, like making East Side Story, West Side Story, because it sounds better. They also seem to think it's possible for a white man to go running through the neighborhoods in Spanish Harlem yelling, Maria, 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 and only have one woman come to the window. Clearly they've never been there. On the right side of the boat, we have an equestrian school. I'm not sure what they're teaching the horses, but they seem pretty happy. They prioritize folks with disabilities and medical conditions for horse therapy, but anyone can go and hang out with the horses. I think it's too cold for them now. I think they've gone home to a warmer spot for the winter. Then we have a large outcropping of buildings on the island, which is one of our current mental health institutions. Once we get past Spanish Harlem, we kind of get into Harlem proper. I did have someone ask me, are there still black people in Harlem? There are still black people in Harlem, although Harlem has definitely shrunk. Originally, it was like 96th Street. That was kind of the dividing line between the white people and the black people. And I know there's a comedian who joked about how, once you get past 96th Street, there's no white people on the subway anymore, but he had fallen asleep, and so somebody woke him up so they could make sure he would get off, because they were like, you're not supposed to be going past this point, we know. So they were very kind in waking him up before that last stop. But today, the gentrification has moved up, I would say, up to 110th Street, or maybe even 115th. Kind of the gentrification has moved up. And when I say that, I mean the neighborhood's kind of started to shift, and apartments are getting renovated and are just more expensive in general. But there still is a vibrant community up in Harlem. It's still the heart of black culture. Lots of poetry and movies and music and comedy coming out of Harlem. 125th Street is kind of the heart and soul of Harlem still today. That's where the Apollo Theater is, if you want to check out any performances. Wednesday night is amateur night, if you want to check it out. Have a fun night. Check out the Apollo Theater. There's some great dining on Frederick Douglass Boulevard. There's great dining all over the area. And then there's a historic neighborhood called Strivers Row, which is some beautiful old brownstones, if you're looking for, a really historic spot to check out. On the Manhattan side, we're just passing by an old school. We have a high school. We have about 400 high schools in New York City, so we have lots of young people. I know most people are like, it's just busy young people, and those workers. And like, no, we have children and families too. And then we're passing by a mall. You gotta have a mall. It has Costco. We have all the things. You just gotta get a little further away. And then you have to get a taxi to take your Costco toilet paper home, because it's not gonna fit in your basket on your bicycle or anything like that. So we're still going past Randall's Island on the right side of the boat. You can see there's some tent sets for events and expos. I have a friend who's really into the bicycle community in New York, and they were having a bike swap meet at 10 p.m. on a Friday, and everyone was going to come, and they were just going to bring their bikes, and you try to sell your bike or swap your bike or buy a bike, and they have barbecue, you know. So it's just kind of fun, you know, place you can have gatherings. We're coming up under the last leg of the Triborough Bridge. The Triborough Bridge spans way back behind us, and then it kind of goes along the length of Randall's Island, and one leg of it goes up to the Bronx, and the other comes out and spits you out on 125th Street in Manhattan, which is the heart of Harlem. So as we go under this last leg, that's where 125th Street, Harlem is. I'm going to be around if you have any questions. We're going to take a break right up until Yankee Stadium. I'll let you know when it's coming up. We got snacks down below and fun drinks on both levels. If you're looking for soda or hot drinks, those are also down on the main deck, not up on the upper deck. Restrooms are all the way downstairs. Don't forget to check out your Circle Line photos. See you in a bit. on that location, and this is the third Yankee Stadium over here. We call Yankee Stadium the house that Ruth built because Babe Ruth forced the Yankees to move out of the Polo Grounds and build their own stadium. So Yankee Stadium, the house that Ruth built. The other big Yankee player is Yogi Berra. Between the 1940s and 60s, he was a catcher and then also later a manager and a coach. And he was also a most valuable player. He had some really strange things that he said though, and they're called yogiisms. And I didn't know too much about Yogi Berra, so I asked my mom, and I was like, hey, what's the deal with Yogi? Did he think that he was serious? Did he know what he was talking about? Like, what's the deal? And she said, well, he was a catcher. He got hit in the head a lot with the ball. So you don't really know. But here are some things, some yogiisms. If you see a fork in the road, take it. Always go to other people's funerals, or they'll never go to yours. Nobody goes there nowadays. It's too crowded. You better cut the pizza into 4 slices tonight. I'm not hungry enough to eat 6. Just silly things that kind of make sense, kind of don't make sense. It's an odd character. It's like Yogi Berra. We're kind of alongside the Bronx. And the Bronx is its own borough, and it is part of the continental U.S. It's the only borough that's part of the continental U.S., so you could drive off to the rest of the continent without going over any over bridges in the Bronx. It's got its own bedrock separate from Manhattan, which we'll talk about a little more later. The Bronx gets its name from Jonas Bronx. Back in the Dutch colonial days, Jonas Bronx was a Swedish man, a very tall man. He was like 6'6". He got granted 500 acres of land in what is now the Bronx, and he wanted to farm there. And most of the folks who were colonizing the area had really anxious relationship with the indigenous people. There wasn't great communication, they didn't understand each other, and so the Dutch didn't know if they never knew if they angered the indigenous people and didn't know if they should be expecting attack. So they were always fearful that they were going to be attacked and have their homes burned down or their crops burned, or they were going to be in trouble, and they didn't know how to protect themselves. Jonas, he decided to make an agreement with the indigenous people in the area saying, I will give you 50% of whatever I farm here, as a kind of a payment, knowing that I'm on your land. And so he set up a really positive relationship with the people in the area, meaning that his farm prospered. And he had incredible produce. Everyone always wanted what was at the Jonas Bronx's farm, because he never delivered. So you always had to go to the farm. And so you would go to the Bronx's farm, and that later became the Bronx. BRONCK apostrophe S, and then they took this NCK off and then they put NX. The Bronx. So we get the name the Bronx. It's the only borough with an article before it, the Bronx. The Bronx is known for the Bronx Zoo, the New York Botanical Gardens, and also having the poorest congressional district in the city, but the wealthiest neighborhoods. So a large dynamic of wealth disproportion in the Bronx. It does have the home of Edgar Allan Poe up there, his cottage. He lived in the Bronx for a couple of years. The home is intact, but it's been moved 3 times, so it's not in the original location, which I think is kind of silly. Edgar Allan Poe is known for writing The Raven, and also the short story form. And off on the Manhattan side, we're going to catch a glimpse of a really high tower, which is part of High Bridge. That's the old water tower, and Edgar Allan Poe used to look out at the water tower and be inspired. We're going under High Bridge, which is an old aqueduct. So this old bridge used to get water to the people. You can see the original arches on the Bronx side of the old aqueduct. So let's take it back a couple of years, back to the American Revolution, when afterwards, when New York started to populate, there became more people on the island, so much so that after we polluted all the waterways, there wasn't enough fresh water to water all the people, and the water that was there was toxic. So they started distributing pier as a form of staying hydrated, including the school children would get like a little half cup of pier created using Roman aqueduct technology to get water from 40 miles north in New York down to Manhattan, using gravity, the slightest rate of gravity, to get the water to the people. And then they use gravity to get the water into the water towers on top of the building, so that high tower that we saw is higher or as high as a lot of the water towers on top of the building. The old buildings, the newer buildings pump the water up that high. The water towers all over the city are made out of wood, because wood produces fluid, so then it's very unstable for frozen water. Also very antimicrobial properties. So we like having wood water towers. Even the new buildings have wood water towers that are up to the sky, but it is required that you have a water tower on top of your building to be able to pump somewhere more, so gravity will shift the water to the people. And a lot of the buildings still use the old water towers as their way of getting water to the people. So if we look out the window on the Manhattan side, we see a lot of green. There's definitely a park over there. We got the Yeshiva University, the big tall buildings, big brown building is over there. And we have outcropping of the bedrock that we use dynamite to make the water river wider here and make the waterway, or the car roadway. So that is New York Shifts, is the name of the bedrock, and it's really, really hard. It's so hard that it makes it really cheap. Not really cheap, but cheaper to build a skyscraper because you don't have to anchor down so hard to get a really good grip on the ground. So it's really called skyscraper anchor. Where you can build a skyscraper anywhere, but you have to dig down further because it's not quite as hard and strong to get into. On the Bronx side, just after this building is Roberto Clemente State Park. Roberto Clemente was a baseball player for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He was also a do-gooder, doing charity work and making missions to deliver goods to Nigeria. His plane went down and he did not survive. The tragedy was Roberto Clemente did not make it back. But all of baseball remembered him. And New York City only has one state park inside of it, and that is Roberto Clemente Park, which is what we're coming up upon right after this building on the Bronx side. You're here on one of the best days for the foliage. I don't know that it's going to get much better than this in terms of the colors. Yellow and the red and the orange. Good timing on your part. Coming up on the Manhattan side is a little boathouse where a lot of folks put their boats into the water. The boathouse was not looking good for a number of years. It was falling down, but it has been renovated recently by none other than Bette Midler. Bette Midler lives in the area, and she saved quite a few little tiny buildings with some money of her own.